Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today and for our webinar today. My name is Anthony Mills. I am the Executive Director of Global Innovation Institute, the world's leading organization for professional certification, business accreditation, and membership in applied business innovation. And again, I want to thank you for joining us. This is our February 2026 webinar, and we host these webinars on a regular basis to continue to expand the community's knowledge and insight and understanding of innovation practices as they are applied around the world. So, again, thank you for joining us today. I'd like to now introduce to you our guest speaker for today and tell you about her. After that, I will turn it over to her to share her insights with us. So, our guest today is Dr. Irina Yashanshal. Irena is the founder and CEO of the Global Entrepreneurs Institute, an organization dedicated to developing entrepreneurial capability through workshops, programs, and certifications. Through the Institute, Irena champions the idea that the greatest resource organizations have is an empowered entrepreneurial workforce equipped to lead change. Irena is also the creator of the annual Global Entrepreneur Summit and Awards Ceremony, a global gathering recognizing and celebrating entrepreneurs reshaping their workplaces from within. Irina is an educator at heart, a teacher, a researcher, an academic scholar, and a corporate consultant and trainer whose work has shaped how thousands of people learn to innovate from within their organizations. For more than 3 decades, she has worked at the intersection of learning, innovation, and the liberation of human potential. Her work is anchored in the belief that learning is the most powerful engine for personal, professional, and organizational transformation. Her passion is helping people rethink how they work, lead, and create value, regardless of their role, industry, or background. Consequently, she has spent her entire career helping people unlock the talent, creativity, and courage they often don't realize they have. Alongside her industry work, Irina contributes to higher education institutions in various ways and has held various roles, including visiting global professor at Ohio State University, executive in residence at Franklin University, adjunct fellow at Griffith University Business School, where she has also been an advisory board member for the Department of Business Strategy and Innovation and currently for the Department of Management. Irina has authored and co-authored numerous publications, including business books, university textbooks, academic journal articles, and founding and editing Entrepreneur magazine. Irina holds bachelor's degrees in arts and education, a master's degree in adult education, and a PhD in creative problem solving. She makes her home in Brisbane, Australia, thus our time shift today. So today, Irina is going to be talking to us about entrepreneurialism, the human potential revolution, which recognizes that the greatest untapped resource in most organizations is human potential, and that organizations can awaken this untapped resource. This is important to us all because developing entrepreneurial capability is essential today, lest we think that AI is going to solve all of our problems, which it isn't. Ensuring that individuals are empowered to experiment, problem solve, and innovate from within allows them to go beyond just improving their organization to transforming them as well as transforming themselves in the process. Irina is going
Mm.
to share with us how to make all this happen. And so, with that, I now want to turn it over to Irina. Join me, if you will, in welcoming someone who embodies the spirit of innovation through education, Dr. Irina Yashin-Shaw. Irina, the floor is all yours.
My goodness, thank you so much, Anthony. Really appreciate that introduction. And thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this remarkable webinar series. I know that I'm number 65, so congratulations on that. I will just go ahead and share my screen. It is literally the title of my presentation, which we'll be exploring together, Entrepreneurialism, the Human Potential Revolution. And I'd actually like to divide my time in two parts, which are the two parts of the title. So firstly, by looking closely at the term entrepreneurialism and why I use that word rather than the more widely known term of entrepreneurship. And then we'll look at why entrepreneurialism represents what I believe is the new human potential revolution when we find ourselves at this current inflection point right now in this in the world and where we are in the world of work. And then towards the end, I'll also share some models that we use at GII to help integrate and anchor all of these products. But before we dive in, let me ask you a question. Think for a moment when you learned something that really changed how you saw yourself. You know, maybe it was a teacher who really stretched you, or a project where your voice really mattered, or a challenge that you rose to with more courage than you realized you had. How did that make you feel? And it's moments like that that shift our identity. And it's moments like that when potential becomes possibility that I look for in my work as an educator every day, which honestly makes it truly joyful work. Many of my colleagues operating in the corporate innovation space have arrived here through business or strategy or organizational development, or in the case of Anthony, engineering and product development. But my path was different. I've come through education. I actually began my career as a high school teacher, and then I moved into higher education and then eventually into workplace learning. So that journey has given me a lens that shapes everything that I do. At the heart of every meaningful innovation is not only a process or a framework or a piece of technology, it's an empowered individual or a group of them, as the case may be, with the confidence to question and imagine and experiment and solve problems that matter. So, if organizations want to be more innovative and resilient and future ready and change agile, all of those qualities we hear so much about at the moment, then they need more than just strategies and tools. They need a critical mass of people who are the opportunity finders and the creative problem solvers and the value creators. In other words, intrapreneurs. And that is the core of the human potential revolution that we're going to be exploring. Now, because of the nature of this group, I'm going to assume that you are all more than familiar with the terms entrepreneur and entrepreneurship. So, could I ask you, please, to drop into the chat box your description of an entrepreneur? And then I will ask Anthony in a moment if he would be so kind as to read out some of your contributions as they come through. Given the amount of research and commentary that's now coming out on the topic, I think it's fairly fair to say that these terms are now mainstream. Not always the case, but I think that most people have come across these words now, entrepreneur and entrepreneurship. But then again, I live and breathe this stuff, so I don't always have an entirely objective perspective about that. But just curious there, Anthony, if you could maybe tell us a little bit about what's coming through the chat box. Oh, you're muted. You just have to unmute yourself.
My apologies. Yes. Uh, One of the comments is someone acting as an independent thinker within an organization, which I think is true. My own experience is someone who, at times, is a rebel to get things done. They see a need, they take the initiative to get it done. So that's the sort of things that we're seeing there.
Yep, yep, absolutely. So what I wanted to address, and thank you very much for your contributions there. I wanted to address this. While the term entrepreneurship may be quite mainstream, the same cannot be said of the word intrapreneurialism. And I want to clarify the distinction between those two words as I see it. So for me, entrepreneurship is a practice where employees are encouraged to be internal entrepreneurs, where they develop and execute innovative ideas. They might be ventures, projects, usually with the support and the resources provided by the company. And many organizations have wonderful entrepreneurship programs that are in-house incubators and accelerators for new products. That's where employees submit their ideas, and if they're selected, they step out of their roles for weeks or months to develop it as a potential new revenue stream for the organization. For example, I know that Nestle has an excellent entrepreneurship program called Ingenious, which crowdsources ideas from over its 300,000 employees. Even if people and right across the organization can submit an idea, the reality is, though, that the number of people who actually have their ideas selected to formally go through the organization's accelerator to develop it is only a tiny fraction of their total workforce. So those kinds of practices are really great for surfacing high potential ideas and signaling innovation intent, but not necessarily for normalizing entrepreneurial behavior and capability at scale across the organization. Intrapreneurialism, on the other hand, is a much broader and deeper construct that refers to a philosophy, a belief system, an underlying principle that shapes how work is understood and enacted. So, in an organizational context, entrepreneurialism is about embedding the conditions, the attitudes, values, and practices across the entire organization that give rise to intrapreneurship at scale rather than confining it to a few select people. So it's an approach to work that all employees can engage in, regardless of their role or function or seniority. So I think it's a more democratized way of liberating human agency and harnessing entrepreneurial talent. And that's why I differentiate those two words. So, in a nutshell, entrepreneurialism shifts the focus from what people do occasionally through projects or experiments to how organizations are designed to work all the time. So it's the organizational discipline of making entrepreneurial actions and behaviors normal, legitimate, and scalable. So I see entrepreneurship as a subset of entrepreneurialism, which is the larger, more abstract concept. Now, this distinction crystallized for me after I read Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, in which he differentiates between finite and infinite approaches to business. So, short term wins versus long term viability. For example, a finite approach might be to focus on quarterly revenue versus long term prosperity, which would be the infinite approach. So, using this lens, intrapreneurship might be thought of as a finite game because it describes projects or initiatives that have a defined start and finish. Intrapreneurialism, by contrast, we could say is the infinite game, as it's about a sustained long-term way of thinking and working reflected in the culture of the organization, shaping the way people approach their work. And the salient point here is that organizations that embrace both are best positioned for the future. So they'll have an entrepreneurial environment that continually enables entrepreneurial behavior and projects, creating that sort of a compounding, enduring strategic advantage. So when entrepreneurialism is embedded as an ongoing way of working, entrepreneurship becomes more than a mechanism for delivering projects, it actually becomes a developmental pathway. So when people engage with entrepreneurship, they change themselves. They change their identity. They develop things like self-efficacy and an internal locus of control. So first of all, the term self-efficacy is the belief that they can be successful when they take on challenges. And that is a very powerful belief for an individual to hold. It shapes how people think, it shapes how they act, how they feel, it influences the goals they set, the expectations they hold, and how they interpret progress, how they respond to setbacks and performance along the way. So self-efficacy is really key to having an identity as an entrepreneur, which develops through entrepreneurial behavior. The other aspect of that is strengthening a person's internal locus of control, which is their belief about who or what influences outcomes in their life and work. So, as people see a clear connection between their actions and meaningful results, their control shifts inwards and they stop waiting for permission or direction and begin to experience themselves as active contributors rather than passive recipients of decisions. So, together, these shifts literally change a person's identity. So they no longer see themselves as role holders, but people who can influence outcomes. And this is the foundation of agency, the belief that through one's actions, we can make a real difference. And that is why entrepreneurship, supported by entrepreneurialism, is such a powerful way to unlock human potential. It shifts the focus from programs to the design of everyday work itself. So rather than extracting high potential individuals from their roles for innovation experiences, like what I mentioned before, it actually shifts it to giving people the latitude, the opportunity, and the support to experiment and learn and innovate within their roles. And this approach recognizes that human potential is most powerfully developed through work. When people are trusted to stretch and explore and solve progressively more complex and strategic problems as part of their normal contribution. So, in this way, entrepreneurialism provides the structural counterpart to entrepreneurship. And it ensures that the newly developing capabilities that people are acquiring have somewhere meaningful to land, have somewhere productive to go. And it transforms human potential into a sustained source of organizational value. And I'll give you some examples of this in a little bit later. So that brings us to the core of why and how entrepreneurialism, I believe, can be understood as the human potential revolution. So rather than extracting value from people through fixed roles and narrow job descriptions, entrepreneurial organizations are designed to continually expand what people are able to contribute over time. So human potential isn't treated as a static resource to be deployed, but more as a dynamic capacity to be developed, trusted, channeled into evolving organizational needs. So, by aligning the growth of individuals with the growth of the organization itself, entrepreneurialism replaces the old employment contract, compliance in exchange for security, with a new contract, capability, agency, and meaning in exchange for sustained value creation. So when we look at it this way, work stops being a constraint on human potential and actually becomes its primary place of expression and development. Now, the reason this is the human potential revolution is because right now people are reassessing their relationship with work, and AI is accelerating that reckoning. So, entrepreneurialism provides the language and the design logic to make that renegotiation really constructive. So let me just take a little detour here for a moment around the word revolution. And I use the word quite intentionally. A revolution is an overthrow or replacement of an existing established system for a new one. And it is a word that looms large in my family history because my father and his parents and sister lived through that tumultuous time of the Russian Revolution. And they, along with hundreds of thousands of other white Russian refugees, made the Dr. Zhivago-esque trek across Russia and into northern China to live in a city called Harbin, which for a time had the largest Russian population in any city outside of the Soviet Union. But the revolution that we are experiencing right now is a very different kind of revolution. In fact, it's not even just one revolution, it's multiple revolutions that are unfolding simultaneously and converging in a way that will fundamentally redefine how we work. So at the technological level, we're seeing a cognitive revolution driven by artificial intelligence that can generate ideas and analyze information, perform tasks once considered uniquely human, and do it all at lightning speed. And this is changing not just how work is done, but how value is created. And then at the organizational level, there's the work design revolution. Traditional roles, hierarchies, and career paths are breaking down, replaced by fluid work and project-based contribution, and the expectation that people continuously evolve their skills and roles over time. At the human level, we are in the midst of an identity revolution where people are questioning the role that work plays in their lives and what meaningful contribution looks like, and whether organizations enable them to grow or constrain their potential. At the cultural level, we're experiencing a power and agency revolution. Employees are no longer willing to be passive recipients of decisions. They want a voice, autonomy, and the ability to shape outcomes that matter. And then at the economic level, there's the talent and value revolution. Organizational advantage is shifting away from assets and processes towards creativity, adaptability, and the capacity to mobilize human capability at scale. And it's the convergence of these revolutions, not any single one of them, that makes this moment right now unprecedented. Together, they demand a new way of organizing work that treats human potential not as a resource to be managed, but as a capacity to be continuously unlocked and expanded. In short, intrapreneurialism. Now, in times like this of paradigm rupture, it's people with self-efficacy and that internal locus of control who become the system shapers. They are our intrapreneurs. And organizations who support these people will be the most adaptable, agile, and successful. But a lot of organizations are doing it back to front. They're focusing their attention on the tools rather than on their people and investing heavily in AI. But the general consensus, as you can see from these recent headlines at the moment, is that the investment isn't paying off particularly well. And the reason is that investment in AI without a similar investment in people to be skilled up and empowered as entrepreneurs will yield limited returns, because it's the intrapreneurs who will reinvent the workflows and create new value. So it makes even more sense when we refer back to our infinite versus finite game model that I referred to before, where using AI for task automation could be considered finite value, whereas using it as human capability multiplier is infinite value. So the revolution happens when AI is used to expand human agency. And organizations that focus on finite gains are in danger of eventually exhausting their people. But organizations that play the infinite game and compound human potential over time, well, that is when they will see a very different kind of headline, such as this one from research that was reported in the Human Resource Development International a few months ago, late last year, entitled, and I love this title, Every Staff is a Superstar and Everyone is an Entrepreneur. Okay, Fair warning, I am going to commit the cardinal sin of presentations, which is don't put lots of text on the screen and don't read from the screen. And I am about to do both of those so forgive me. I have slightly paraphrased the abstract of that incredible article to fit on this slide, and I'm just going to read it out. The workplace as we know it is dissolving. Artificial intelligence is not simply automating tasks, it is rewriting the rules of human potential and organizational design. In this new era, every staff member has the capacity to become a superstar, empowered by AI to achieve levels of productivity, creativity, and insight once reserved for the few. And this shift redefines leadership, flattens hierarchies, and demands a profound reconsideration of what work, management, and human value mean in an AI-driven economy. And so this research, which is reported in the article, explores how AI-empowered superstars, mass entrepreneurship, and mass intrapreneurship are reshaping the landscape of learning and development, leadership, and corporate structures, offering both opportunities and urgent debates. Now, my brain nearly exploded when I read that article. I was so excited. Let me share a little bit more of what came from that. Other key points: that entrepreneurial capacity is universal. So the authors argue that entrepreneurial behavior can no longer be confined to a few roles, but rather that all employees must be seen as capable of initiative and judgment and opportunity spotting. The reason I said that my brain nearly exploded when I read the article was because I've been advocating something very similar for decades, but in relation to creativity, that everyone is capable of being creative. But many people think that they are not because they've lived in systems that have structurally suppressed their creativity. And the same is now being said of thinking entrepreneurially. And the article refers to this as mass intrapreneurship. The second key point that I really took away was that human agency is the primary source of value creation. So as routine tasks are increasingly automated, organizational value shifts from execution to sense making and opportunity finding and problem contextualization done by empowered humans who take the initiative to shape outcomes. Another one is that organizations must redesign conditions and not just upskill individuals. So the authors emphasize that entrepreneurial contribution emerges when systems and culture and leadership authorize and expect initiative. And this supports the framing of entrepreneurialism as a contextual condition rather than a behavior checklist or a program. Also, that AI amplifies agency when used as a cognitive partner, not just a tool. So when AI is used to augment thinking, exploration, and learning rather than merely to automate work, it becomes a force multiplier for entrepreneurial contribution, which then in turn accelerates the conversion of human potential into organizational value. Also, that entrepreneurialism enables becoming, not just performing. So work is reframed as a vehicle for human development and identity formation, where capabilities evolve and compound over time. And entrepreneurialism makes possible what neither traditional employment nor AI optimized work alone can manage, which is self-authored contribution at scale inside organizations. So all of this is beautifully summed up in one sentence, which I quote from the article. When agentic AI assumes the burden of rule-driven work, human talent can finally turn outward towards creativity, leadership, and entrepreneurship, and by extension, entrepreneurship. Brilliant article. So I strongly recommend you have a look at it. Out of curiosity, I asked ChatGPT to come up with a conceptual model to pull together all of this thinking, and not just from the article, but everything else that preceded my reference to the article as well. And this is what it gave me. Not perfect, but I have to say, I was pretty darn impressed. It was a much more sophisticated model than I was expecting. It ticks a lot of boxes. Human agency is the engine at the core, fueled by organizational conditions and AI, manifesting through entrepreneurship in the context and flow of work, which provides the opportunity for both learning and problem solving, which in turn activates latent human potential, ultimately resulting in value creation if entrepreneurialism provides the conditions. Huh. So that's a one-sentence summary of a fairly complex, layered conceptual model, which I've named the Entrepreneurial Agency Model, or IAM for short. And I share it here because it's a great example of how AI can be a cognitive amplifier. Because as it turns out, I'm working on a book chapter at the moment, unpacking a number of these concepts that I'm sharing with you this evening. And I'm going to use this model as a starting point to piggyback on. So although this model is not the finished product, it will help me to get there much faster. And the big question is, how do we make this magic happen in the real world? Because I've been talking very conceptually up until now. So let's go back in the mists of time to 2021, to a pre-chat GPT world when models were created the old-fashioned way through the blood, sweat, and tears of hard cognitive labor. And I will share with you a model that we use to help organizations go on the journey to entrepreneurialism in a very practical way. So it's our 12-month journey map to becoming an accredited entrepreneurial organization. And the process simultaneously builds entrepreneurial capacity in individuals and more broadly across the organization. And it all starts with a diagnostic using our proprietary tool to provide data on the organization's entrepreneurial maturity. And then that generates a report. So we have a baseline against which we can identify priorities and measure progress. Now, it's a tool that helps to make entrepreneurialism observable rather than aspirational. So the diagnostic itself measures in the four categories of entrepreneurial leadership, the extent to which leaders across the organization create the authorizing environment for innovation and entrepreneurialism. In other words, how much do the leaders support entrepreneurial behaviors? The second aspect is systemic creativity, the extent to which creative problem solving is embedded in the workforce as a source of innovation. Entrepreneurial orientation is the level of commitment across the workforce to value creation, change, and innovation, and entrepreneurial systems, the extent to which the structures, channels, and messaging of the organization supports entrepreneurialism. And in each of the four categories, there are 5 dimensions: attitude, understanding, skill, context, and results, from which we derive the name of the tool, which is OSCAR. Now, there are clearly identifiable sets of conditions in each category that facilitates the conversion of human agency into organizational value. And I'm not going to go through all the dot points. I can send the PowerPoints to Anthony. So if you want to refer to them at your leisure, if you wish, you can do so. I only present them here purely for the purposes of anchoring the discussion in practicalities to demonstrate that there are a set of conditions which do help convert human agency into organizational value. Then, once the diagnostic is analyzed, the organization can see which level of entrepreneurialism they sit at. And there are 5 levels that reflect how organizations differ in their ability to activate and embed human agency. And the lowest is regulated, where human agency is literally just structurally suppressed. The next level is frustrated. Agency is recognized but not authorized. Aspiring, where agency is encouraged but not yet embedded. And elevated is the next one, number 4, where agency is enabled through systems and leadership. And the highest level is entrepreneurial, where agency is normalized, distributed, and compounded. Um, So just as a general observation, underperforming organizations don't lack talent, they actually just lack agency enablers. So back to our journey model. So after that initial diagnostic of phase 1, phase 2 involves engaging and upskilling the leaders at all levels to support entrepreneurialism. Phase 3 is the workforce education and skill building, which can happen via a range of pathways. But the one that we most highly recommend is to engage a critical mass of employees through the Professional Certificate of Intrapreneurialism, which is our flagship course. And it's a 6-month program that teaches and embeds the entrepreneurial skill set and the entrepreneurial methodology. The hallmark of this program is that it is embedded in the participants' work and expertise, and everyone delivers a high-value project for the organization that aligns with the organization's strategic goals. The program can also be done as a standalone without necessarily being part of the accredited process, as can phases 1 and 2. And then phase 4 is change making and transformation at scale, where people either take their projects to the next level, scale them up, or go on to initiate new ones. And then phase 5 is evaluation and accreditation. A post-program survey tracks changes to the baseline data from phase 1. And then 2 things can happen at this point, depending on the survey outcomes. The organization either receives their accreditation or they iterate the process. But this journey develops both entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship. I made the point at the beginning of the webinar that it's these two together that provide that enduring strategic advantage. So, in the interests of anchoring all of this in reality, this is a data set from one organization that went on the journey, and they transitioned from being an elevated organization, as you can see from the spider graph there, it's at level 4, to being an entrepreneurial organization over 12 months. And the change there doesn't look like much, just a thin area on a graph, but it represented a huge amount of work and commitment and dedication from everyone. And some further examples from professional practice I'll share with you here. Each year, the Global Entrepreneurs Institute hosts a summit and awards ceremony where we recognize outstanding entrepreneurs in different sectors from all around the world. I am always so inspired by these amazing entrepreneurs and the amazing work they do. And through that work, many of them transform not just themselves and their individual organizations, but sometimes entire industries. And one of our key missions with the awards is to shine a light on incredible work that's being done in sectors other than the corporate sector, which tends to be the one that gets most of the attention. So we recognize education, not-for-profit, government, student, and in 2025, last November at our most recent summit, we introduced a new category of outstanding entrepreneur in the First Nations sector. And the inaugural award recipient was Tia Shante Southwood on the bottom left of the screen. She established a charitable arm inside her organization to expand First Nations cultural education right across Australia, and it is having a huge impact. The other one that I'll just mention, they're all incredible, but I'll mention the Entrepreneurial Team Award, which you'll see on the right-hand side of the bottom there. That went to the battery materials team from Worley in Europe. Now, these four employees took an idea just from zero, literally, to $1 billion in revenue, in new revenue, in just 3 years. I mean, that is the stuff of legends. And they have achieved what most people would just say was impossible. And it proves what empowered entrepreneurs can deliver when trusted with agency, working inside a system that allows entrepreneurship to emerge and scale. And in this case, interestingly, AI was not the core driver for their project. It was human agency enabled through entrepreneurialism. So, what's really important is not just that these wonderful entrepreneurs have delivered what they've delivered in this instant that got them their award, but it's really what they have become through that process and what they will continue to deliver in the future. And so I strongly recommend that you grab a coffee, give yourself 30 minutes to be absolutely inspired. Go to the website, theglobalentrepreneurssummit.com, and watch their acceptance speeches where they talk a little bit about their journey and what they've done and the impact it's had. And if you can spare a little more time, then have a look at some of the previous year's recipients as well. Um, and then while you're there, if you are really captivated by this topic, you might want to look at the recording of last year's summit. The theme for it was Entrepreneurs Fueled by Creativity, Amplified by AI. I gave a 12-minute presentation on the topic of creative thinking in the age of AI, opportunities and challenges for entrepreneurs. And it echoes a number of the themes that we've explored in this webinar. So let me wrap up by saying that the most underutilized technology in most organizations is not AI, it's people. And entrepreneurialism is how we finally upgrade that system. And that is the human potential revolution. Back to you, Anthony.
Thank you so much. Yes, and if you want to turn off the screen share, that would be good. Then the people can just look at us. But
Yeah,
thank you. That's wonderful. I did also share in the chat some information from Irina, the PCI information pack, the Accredited Entrepreneurial Organization information pack, and GII company profile on her behalf there. So if you're
thank
interested in
you.
looking at those, you can click on those links in the chat to find them. And so at this point, yeah, we want to open up the floor to question and answer, to audience questions. So whatever questions you have, feel free to put them in the chat window, and we will try to, or have Irina try to address them. And whatever's on your mind, we'd like to entertain those questions. And I'll just kick it off with a few questions of my own. First of all, in your organizational assessment process, I assume you have individuals who have been certified as assessors for that, who know how to use the tool set. How do you orchestrate that?
It comes through GII.
Okay.
So it all comes through our organization. So we keep that in-house. So
Okay.
people apply to us, and then we arrange with them to take. The way we do it is we take a thin slice, depending on the
Mhm.
size of the organization. If it's a small
Right.
organization, we can survey everyone. If it's only
Hmm.
50 people, if it's a huge organization, then we do sort of a thin slice from
Okay.
across all levels. Mm.
I see. I understand. So yeah, you do the assessment process directly in-house. Okay.
Yeah.
And as organizations go through that journey, and they make progress and they get to a certain level of achievement, how do they ensure they keep the cycle going and it's continuously improve on that? Is there some incentive to keep that going, or is it the subject of different leadership coming in and going and turning around?
The expectation is that those skill sets and those conditions that are embedded during the process of the journey become self-maintaining. They generate a certain degree of internal energy to keep them going. So the option that organizations have is to do yearly top-ups after they've achieved their accreditation, and to just keep those concepts top of mind for the organization.
Okay. That's good. And I mean, I assume too, they have to kind of keep their senior leaders up to date and in the know
Yeah,
about this program and what's happening and what it's for.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
the challenge I sometimes see is when senior leadership changes, you get some leader retires, a new one comes in, and now you have to kind of bring them up to
yeah,
speed on this as well.
yeah,
I'm sure that happens.
absolutely. And that is the reality. And unfortunately, I have had the experience where, we got um, did wonderful work, got quite a way through the program. Senior leadership changed,
Yep.
priorities changed,
Yes.
program didn't finish.
Yeah.
So, I have seen that in so many different incarnations, not
Yeah.
necessarily coming through my my
Right.
my program,
Right.
but in different organizations where wonderful initiatives will suddenly just get stopped
Yes. Happens with a
because of
lot
a
of corporate
change. Yeah,
innovation. Happens a lot with the corporate innovation
absolutely.
programs. Yeah, you have a
Yeah,
innovation program, new leader comes in,
yep,
closes.
yep.
I actually lived through that. I was an
Yeah.
executive at a company, and we got a new president, and he shut down the R&D activities.
Hmm. Hmm.
That happens all kinds of programs.
Yep. Happens
So
everywhere.
it
Yeah.
does. So in our audience, Barbara, one of our regulars here, thank you, Barbara. She would like to know, what do you think of companies implementing strict return to office or return to work policies? Some employees likely do abuse trust, but most don't. Do you think flexibility of place helps to build trust? Any opinions on this?
I think you know trust is so fundamental to people feeling engaged. And yeah, you'll always get a few who will abuse it. There and look, we have to be a little bit sensitive to that, because sometimes people come with a bit of baggage to organizations. Um, Coming from an education background, I had in my early career, I worked in different schools, and some schools where the principal literally treated all the teachers like children. The teachers acted like children. So it's that kind of, like, if you don't trust people and you don't trust them to be developed and professional grown-ups, then you'll actually end up with exactly how you treat them. So I think that giving people autonomy and that capacity to make their own decisions about how they organize their work, etc., is a huge tool for engagement. And look, if you get people abusing it, you just have to treat that or deal with it on a case by case basis. But I think generally speaking, it's better to err on the side of being more generous with one's trust, and giving autonomy and not micromanaging.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, what it comes down to is two things really. Is first of all, treating your workforce like the adults they are. Okay, that's the first thing, because they're not going to exercise agency until you do that. And the second
Exactly.
thing is right, like you said, cultivating the trust, because once if we are going to treat people like adults, we're going to exercise a certain amount of trust, and that is paramount to doing this. So. I think to go back to Barbara's point, while there's certainly value in sometimes being together for collaboration purposes, there's also a lot of value in giving people the autonomy to choose when and where they, how they work and so forth.
Yeah.
And we had a webinar some time back where that was the whole subject was restructuring the workplace and the workforce to give people full autonomy, tell them the outcomes they want, not how to do it, not when to do it, not where to do it, but tell them the
Yeah.
outcomes. And
Yeah.
and I think that sort of same environment is one that really promotes entrepreneurialism inside the
Yeah.
organization. They go hand in hand.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, and that's what happened with the case study that I shared from Wall-E, the team of 4 people who
Hmm.
went from, an idea to $1 billion in 3 years. That's very much how they functioned. So the
Right.
senior leaders gave them that kind of authorizing environment where it wasn't even like we expect to see some returns by, the 6th of January. It wasn't that kind of a process. They just gave them so much latitude and it paid off in spades. Yeah,
Yeah. Because yeah, right, people will, if they're driven to do this, they will hold themselves accountable to their own deliverables.
exactly. Yeah,
Absolutely. And,
yeah.
and another again, anyone else has questions, feel free to put them in the chat here. We would love to answer your questions. But in the meantime, another thought that was in my mind was, the whole discussion around psychological safety. You can't even begin to have entrepreneurialism without psychological safety. It seems to be a
Mhm.
bedrock principle. You want to comment on that? I noticed it in one of your bullet points too. Yes.
It was in the model that
Yes.
ChatGPT generated. Yes. So there's been so much research around this as well. Unless people feel that they can contribute without censure, unless they feel safe to be able to make the out of the box comments without being derided, whether they feel supported, if they make a mistake, that they're not going to be hauled over the coals for it. All of those things are key to people feeling that they can bring their best selves to work and make those contributions. Uh,
Mhm.
and if it only takes one person to be treated badly, and everyone else will also learn the lesson from that. So it is a bit of it's a tall order, but it's certainly one of the keys to liberating potential.
Yeah, yeah, and Barbara said, she loves psychological safety, but it has to be real and not have being later used as a weapon at a later time. So it
Mhm.
has to be consistent and ongoing and persistent, and that requires, of course, a culture where all the leaders are, they understand and appreciate this, and they extend that safety. It really only takes one bad leader to kind of start messing things up. So the
Yes,
organization has
yes,
to be really
yes,
aligned in that way.
yeah.
And here's another question on my mind is, in addition to the sort of the practices that your model, your framework has developed, in developing entrepreneurialism, what is the role of specific events and activities? And let me give you an example. When I worked at Whirlpool Corporation, we used to sponsor every year a business plan competition, and these were intense activities. And I actually led a team. We won the first year, and then I helped run the competitions somewhat the following years. But the 6 months of intense research and mentoring and going out and trying to identify a lucrative opportunity and do the justification. And this is on top of your regular work. So evenings and weekends, you're spending a lot of time. But everyone, there were a lot of people that got plugged into this program, and they were passionate about what they're pursuing. And I see events and activities like these business plan competitions as being really wonderful tools for promoting entrepreneurialism. And not only that, it pulls out of the woodwork the people who are inclined to do this, who want to do this and passionate. So I'd love to hear about what your experiences and thoughts about specific programs and activities like that.
Yeah, look, they're all good. So programs like that, incubators, in-house accelerators, uh, everything to do with what you've just mentioned are fantastic. It's a wonderful way to get people involved. My only caveat is that it can't be just that.
Hmm.
So, it's that combination of events but taking place inside that broader that much broader context of entrepreneurialism, because
Hmm.
often the events are to do with entrepreneurship, where they
Yeah.
have a defined beginning and an end and they're finite,
Hmm.
and as long as they are embedded in the broader context within the conditions of entrepreneurialism, so that authorizing environment actually is there every day, not just for some of the time while the event is on, then it's great. But I also know that a lot of organizations, and it doesn't sound like the one that you just shared is one of them, but a lot of organizations use events as tick boxes. Like,
Mm,
okay, oh, we've got to do some innovation. We've got innovation in our strategy. We've got to do some innovation. Let's get an innovation speaker in to tell us about innovation, and we'll have an innovation day. Tick.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm with you.
that's not going to change the world. That's not going to
No.
change their organization. That's not going to change how their employees work every day and how they interact and what they bring to work with their ideas. So that's my only caveat. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're right, and amen to that, and that's what we call innovation theater when they're just
Yeah.
yeah let's have a hackathon. Okay, tick, we had the
Yeah.
hackathon, great, and,
Yeah.
and nothing else
Yeah.
happens out of that, and because it's not embedded into the culture and ethos of the organization. And I love
Mm,
your model here of the distinction between entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship, and I think they're very complementary. But you start
mm,
with entrepreneurialism, the ethos, the culture, the mindset, the philosophy, and that surrounds everything else. And then entrepreneurship are the events and activities and projects that happen
mm.
outside of
Yeah.
that, like the hackathons or the incubators, accelerators, the business plan competitions.
Yeah.
And they certainly support that, but those have no real life, no enduring and ongoing life without first being surrounded by this environment of
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. So that's a
In
beautiful.
fact, Anthony, there's some really interesting research that shows that people who've gone into those events, they've gone into an accelerator or they've gone into an incubator and they've gone through the process of developing their idea and whether it eventually gets to breathe life in the real world or not. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But after they've been in that accelerator for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. They then go back to their original role and they become a flight risk because they've outgrown their role. So they
Hmm.
don't want to go back to that work anymore. And unless there is some really careful work done by the HR department or whoever to help them to be reintroduced to the organization as such, once they've breathed the rarefied air of the accelerator, um, they often leave. They
Hmm.
leave the organization. So what the organization's actually done is that they've upskilled someone to export them to some other organization that can get the long-term benefits of it. So there's quite a few caveats around the value of the separate event type activities. Mm.
So how do you then, if that's the case, and then we'll take this as the last question then, how do we reward the people who are engaging with new ideas and being passionate about that and pursuing them and pushing them and owning them and then making them a reality? How do we reward those people in a way that they love and that keeps them engaged forever?
Yeah, that's probably one of the simplest things to do, and that is recognize them. Like
Yeah.
the research even shows that it's not about the money. It's not that people aren't looking necessarily provided they're earning a good fair wage for their skill set, right? Um, Very often you'll find entrepreneurs actually doing things because they're passionate about it, because they love it, because it sparks something inside them, it gives them life, they draw energy from it. So one of the most rewarding things an organization can do is to recognize those people, to
Mhm.
celebrate their achievements, to let everyone know about their contributions, put some, fanfare around it, and people love it. They love it.
Yes,
It's
yes,
often that's all they want. They want the
yes,
respect of their colleagues. They
yes,
want to know that their contribution has been appreciated, that
yes.
it has made a difference in the world. It's like literally, like how easy is that? You know?
It is. It is. And we encourage organizations to have like quarterly ceremonies where you recognize these people
Yeah,
for these
yeah,
contributions and keep
yeah,
that going all the time. And
yeah,
you're 100% right. That level of recognition and making them like sort of superstars in a way for a moment, and that really is rewarding. That's the intrinsic reward they need from it, and that is very beautiful. So.
Yeah.
I think with that, that brings us to the top of the hour. And man, this has been wonderful, great insight. And I just want to thank you so much, Irina, for sharing these wonderful insights for us, sharing a little bit about Global Entrepreneurs Institute and your work in the world and how you're helping to promote this and this whole idea of entrepreneurialism. So we really value that and appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time. And
And thank you for the
yeah.
invitation.
Yes, our
Thank you.
pleasure. Yes. And for those who are watching the audience, thank you again for your participation. We will follow up with the recording and so forth. But thank you all for being a part of this. And so with that, Irina, do you have any final comments you'd like to leave us with before we sign off?
It's the witching hour here. So it's literally just turned 12 midnight.
Yes. Right.
My final comment would be to say thank you to you, Anthony, to the fantastic work that the Institute does at your end. We're all part of the one family. I want to
Yes.
thank Barbara, who's been very active in the chat box. So thank you, Barbara. I will indeed send the PowerPoints to Anthony to share them with everyone if that's required. And happy to do this any other time you want to. Thank you,
Okay.
Anthony.
And I'm sure you're happy for people to reach out to you to learn more about your
Oh,
this. So I would encourage
absolutely.
everyone to do that. All right. So
Thank
thank you
you.
again so much, and we wish everyone a great rest of your morning, evening, or night. And I guess it's the next day for you in Australia. So have a wonderful time. Take care, everyone.
Bye
Goodbye.
bye.